Hi there, I'm Chelsea with Ascend Your Asana, and this week I'm bringing you a 5-day handstand series. So I polled my Instagram community a while ago, and I got an overwhelming response that people wanted to learn how to do a handstand. So I finally took the time to put together this 5-day series that goes over everything from warming up and foundational drills, strength drills, using Paul the Wall, how to safely enter and exit out of a handstand, and then also that infamous freestanding handstand. So all of this will be in a 5-day series that's coming this week, and I hope you're excited. You can either join me for one day or all 5, whatever suits you best, and I'm looking forward to going on this handstand journey with you. So today we're going to get started with day 1, which is going over warm-ups and just basically setting our foundation for a proper handstand. So if you've ever watched someone do a handstand, you notice that our hands are acting as our feet, our wrists are acting as our ankles, our arms and forearms are acting as our legs, and so on and so forth. But the problem with this, and what kind of trips people up, is that our wrists and our arms aren't used to supporting the full weight of our body. And so when people try to get into handstand by just jumping right on in, they can really risk injuring themselves and pulling a muscle or something in their forearm. And coming from a person that has personally done this before, you do not want a wrist injury because it can put you out of the game for a month, if not more. So one way we can try to prevent a wrist and forearm injury is by doing some wrist warm-ups. So the first exercise we're going to be doing is just showing you how to go through a series of exercises to warm up those wrists. So one exercise you can do is by simply placing or clasping your hands around each other and then just circling your wrists in one direction. And you can do this for about 10 to 15 reps or so, and then just switch directions. So you really feel this firing in your forearms along with your wrists, and it's just kind of moving them through their full range of motion. So after you do about 10 to 15 reps of this, you can move into these elbow lifts. So sometimes I like to bend my fingers in this position because in handstand our fingers are bent more than straight. So I like to bend them and then just lift your elbows up as high as you can, as far as you can, go before your wrists kind of stop you. And then bring it back down and then come up. And we're just kind of squeezing lightly, putting pressure with our palms together. And again, you can do about 10 to 15 reps of these. Now, one thing we want to avoid doing when we're doing wrist exercises is to avoid shaking our wrists. A lot of people are like, oh, my wrists are so tired, shake. But that can actually really be detrimental to your wrists and can actually cause injury because you're just like flopping them willy-nilly. So I guess it's technically okay to get that out of the way when you're warming up your wrists, but after you've been practicing for a while and your wrists are really sore, it's a terrible idea to shake your wrists. So we just try to avoid that altogether and just not even do it in the first place. So the next exercise we're going to do, we're going to be in a tabletop position. So just bring your knees under your hips and your wrists under your shoulders. And all you need to do for this one is just rock your weight back and forth. So we're just putting pressure on our weight by rocking forward and then rocking back. And you can technically also do this in a plank position, but just for educational purposes, we're just going to do this in a tabletop position. It's a lot less core engagement. So you can just rock back and forth, and then you can flip your fingers out to the side and then do some nice side-to-side rocking. And after a little while of this, you can kind of flip your fingers towards your knees and then pull your weight back. So pull those sit bones back towards the back of the mat and feel that nice stretch through the wrist. And then you can even flip your palms facing forward and the backs of your hands are on the mat, fingers pointing towards each other. You can rock back and forth. And then again, put those fingers towards your knees and then pull backward. And this one's a little more delicate, so you want to be gentle with yourself here. And so yeah, just kind of do that to warm up as you see fit. And then the next exercise we're going to do is also in this tabletop position. We're just going to do some nice palm elevations. So we're just going to come up onto those finger joints and then press our palm back down. Come up and press back down. So this is firing and warming up those forearms along with the wrists. You can alternate if you want. It's just kind of feeling what your body needs and going from there. Really just warming them up. Maybe do about 20 reps of these. Na 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 na. All right, so after we do that, another terrible exercise this is actually my least favorite exercise is to do these these fist pumps. So you can just come into a nice seated position, and all we want to do is make a fist with our hands and then spread our fingers out wide. And you want to make sure you're pulling them out as wide as they can go and then squeezing them tightly. So we're just going to do this, and you can kind of get faster as you go. See how fast you can go while still fully extending those fingers at the top. And it may seem simple, but it actually gets really exhausting. And you want to aim to do this for about 30 seconds to a minute. If you can do a minute, it's very impressive because it does get exhausting. And if you want even more of a challenge, you can bring your arms up overhead. Now you feel almost your triceps firing, your forearms, and you'll start to get really sore. So this is a wonderful exercise to warm up the body. Whew, okay, let's just call that a minute. All right, so those are pretty good exercise for warming up those wrists and forearms. If you're not feeling it already, I suggest you do a little more, but this fist pumping one is a really great way to fire those forearms. So now we want to talk about the placement of our hands. So a lot of people will tell you that you need to have your hands straight out in handstand. And while this is okay and obviously totally acceptable, this is what a lot of people aim for, in fact. The problem we face is that not a lot of people have as much wrist mobility to be able to hold themselves in that position. So if you lack that wrist mobility, if you have your hands in this position, you won't be able to get that full 90-degree angle between that hand and forearm. And what will happen is you will kind of just automatically tip backward, or I should say tip back the way you jumped up. So to get around this wrist mobility, it's okay to turn your wrists out about 25 degrees. That doesn't require as much wrist mobility, and that's what I personally use. If I try to do a handstand like this with the straight hands, I can't hold it as long. So there's nothing wrong with turning your wrists out just a bit. So now that we have that done, we want to think about where we're placing our weight when we're going into a handstand. So when you look at the palm, they'll kind of be like a 4 quadrant, so like right here, right here, right here, and right here. We never want to place our weight into our fingers because that will kind of help push us backward. So the only time we want to push or put any weight into our fingers is when we are trying to prevent ourselves from falling into like a wheel pose. So as soon as you feel like you're falling backward, that's when you want to put that weight into those fingers to kind of push yourself back and correct your weight. Otherwise, we the fingers are there for basically just balancing. We really want to focus on this joint between the index finger and the thumb. This is what we call the index finger mound. This is where you want to really focus on pressing into when you're coming up into handstand. So you can almost just like focus on pressing into that mound by doing a light hand exercises. And another thing is when you look at someone doing a handstand, their hands are never like straight. Their fingers are never flat on the mat. You always want to be clawing your fingers into the mat, so have that nice bend in those fingers, and that really helps you get that nice grip. And that also prevents, so if you like start falling forward, those fingers are what will catch you and push you back so you don't risk like falling and tipping all the way over. So you want to think about pressing into that index finger mound, turning those hands out if you need to, or keeping them straight, and then curling those fingers and clawing the mat. And that's a great foundation for your arms. Now while we're in this positioning, we want to also think about really keeping our elbows straight and almost locked out. And so a lot of people kind of bow their elbows out and they're like, I'm doing it. And while that's great for learning if you have a little less mobility, what you really want to do is keep those elbows locked. That's how you can get the proper positioning in a handstand. So one way to do this is what we call, a tricep wrap. So our triceps are obviously the back of the arm. So we place our hands in the right positioning, press through the index finger mound, spread out our fingers wide and claw them into the mat. And then we do this tricep wrap, which is let's bow our elbows out to the side and then wrap them under towards our torso. So when you do this, you'll notice there's just enough give and balance to get you in the right positioning. And when you do this, you'll notice your shoulder blades automatically broaden and like pull away from each other. And that's what we want. So it sets our shoulder girdle up into the right positioning for handstand. So now that we have the placement of the arms right, the next thing we'll be talking about is knitting our ribs in. So when we're first learning how to handstand, it's completely normal to get that kind of banana back shape where your legs are a little over the body and your ribs are flaring out and your chest is flaring out. And you'll see a lot of people do this because they don't have that full ability to get that overhead flexion of their arms. So when you flare out your ribs, it allows you to balance and handstand without getting that full extension. So that's when you'll see the banana back forming. And it's okay to do that when you're just learning how to do a handstand, but to get the correct positioning, you really need that core engagement. That'll help you straighten out that core and correct that banana back. In addition to working on your ability to get that full overhead extension as well. But so when we're trying to get that full, what we call hollowness in the abdomen, we do what we call knitting the ribs. So just kind of do this with me. Place your hands kind of halfway at the bottom of your rib cage, so half on your abdomen, half on your lower ribs. And just taking a nice expansive inhale. And when you do this, you'll feel your rib cage flaring open and your abdomen swelling. And then on your exhale, think about bringing your ribs down and tucking that tailbone down and pulling the belly button towards the torso. So you see how I did that deep inhale, ribs flaring, exhale. So I'm tucking my tailbone down, I'm pulling my belly button in towards my navel, and I'm tucking my ribs under, knitting my ribs together. And so this will allow you to get kind of like this nice flattening of the lower back and hollowness in the abdomen. And this is the correct positioning that we want for handstand. So as we progress through this handstand series, constantly think about what your core is doing. Is your core engaged? Because we always want our core active and engaged, and those ribs knitting together. So that's basically the proper positioning for handstand and some great warming up tips. One other thing I'm going to leave you with before we go today is how to massage our wrists after we've been practicing handstand. So you'll notice that your wrists and your forearms especially will get really sore if you've been practicing the whole, for like a half hour or more. So one way you can gently massage your forearms is by placing them on the mat and just using the weight of your knee to kind of massage and do little circles on your forearm. You can even go onto your wrist. This feels really good. And it's just a way to leverage your own body weight to give yourself a nice massage. And then another way to do that is to get into this nice low yogic squat, this nice malasana, and kind of pull your arms behind your legs and then tuck them into your knees and then squat onto those forearms. So your legs are kind of collapsing into those forearms. And you can just rock back and forth. And if you do this for yourself, you'll feel how good this actually really feels. You can also do some ankle rolls or some wrist rolls as you do this, or some fist pumps. And it's a really great way to just wind down and massage those wrists and forearms after a long handstand practice. So I hope you found today a little educational and a great way to just kind of warm up the body, and I hope you've realized the importance of warming up the body before jumping in a handstand. So tomorrow for day 2, we're going to be bringing you some strengthening drills that you can try before actually getting inverted. So we won't be getting inverted, we'll just be building the strength and foundations for handstand. So I can't wait to see you guys tomorrow, and I hope you enjoyed today's practice. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye.